Hello and welcome to our Birch in Action Manager Series Reviews and Approval Requests webinar. I'm Kylie Marie. I'm a Client Success Manager here at Be Online Learning, and today I'll be taking you through our Birch Learning Platform. We'll briefly review the key components that make up the Birch platform before diving into today's topic, of which there is a lot to cover. There is a question and answer box available for you during these sessions. And I'll prompt as we go along. If there's time, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I'll do it after the event. Like we do at the beginning of all of our webinars, we just want to quickly touch on the 4 key components of Birch. So we've got our learning paths, which we actually refer to as goals, and that's what we create. And the goals are made up of elements, and the elements can be learning activities like e-learning content, on-the-job assessments, and events like workshops and webinars. We then have connections and tags, which provide extraordinary flexibility in how you create learning groups and work teams to enhance reporting and display featured learning. We may not explicitly touch on these components during today's webinar, but there may be some references here and there. Okay, let's switch to demonstration. So to quickly recap on last week in relation to the topic of reviews and approvals, we do have the individual approval request icon here on the team view. And when you click on that, it pop-up appears on the screen just for that staff member and the approval requests that they have outstanding. You can action it accordingly from here, but for the purposes of today's webinar, we're going to go through the full workflow, which means going and accessing the approvals from either the top right section of team view or the approval requests in the side menu. Both of these buttons do take you to the same screen. So we'll get started here at the search filter that you can use for approval requests. So if there is a particular event or element, perhaps it's an element that they need to self-register for but need approval to register for it, that may be here, or an event or a particular learner that you need to focus on, you can use these filters here. If we look up Betty Smith, search, Betty Smith will come up. With the elements, you can just use keywords like induction. It doesn't need to be the whole name. And if you try a filter down here, so if you perhaps share managerial duties with someone, so Michael shares manager duties with myself, we can actually search by that manager and anyone that we share comes up. And you can approve it instead of them. Instance names for events, that's available for you as well, if it's in particular. So here we've got an element called induction workshop, but some people may just use the term welcome walkabout. So you would probably put that in here for the instance name search. You may have seen me just remove my name from here. So if you ever do attempt to do a search filter and it doesn't work out or return a result, you can just click the little X to remove all those items in that field. Always remember, once you've put in the fields, to hit search. And obviously, if everything's blank, it will go back and list just all the approvals you have as a manager. You should only be seeing those that are listed as a manager approval. If you hold another security role and are a manager as well, then potentially you will see more. Now, each request here is displayed as a card, is what we call it. So Betty Smith has a card, Jim Holmes has a card. It outlines the details of the request. So Betty Smith has requested to actually register for an element, whereas Jim has registered or requested to attend an event. So we can see here the instance details, the date and time, particularly if you're dealing with rostering and having to make sure that you've got the right people available or off the roster for that time period. To approve, you would just click one of these ticks. So we'll go with Jim. But now, for Jim, this instance that he's requested is actually full. So as a manager, you get a warning to say that the instance is full. And because the waitlist has been enabled, you can give the option to add a waitlist, add him to the waitlist, or you can just decline the request straight out. We will add him to the waitlist. And you can see that his request has disappeared. And now, if the instance is full and the waitlist hasn't been enabled, so let's have a look at Kylie Marie here. You can see we get a warning to say the instance is full and you cannot add this user. So the only option you have, if the waitlist isn't enabled and the event has reached its capacity, is you decline the request. And we'll just leave that for the moment. If you get to the point where you are declining the request for a learner, you can then go and register them into an alternative instance from their goal profile, but that's something that we're going to look at further during our last webinar in this manager series, which is on June 29th. So we'll leave that for the moment. And of course, when you approve and it's all well and good, same goes for an element or an event, request is accepted and it disappears from the list. There are some messages that get sent out with each of these actions, which we're going to go through later at the end of the webinar, and depending on what action you take. And in a nutshell, that covers the approval process from a manager's point of view. Okay, we're going to move to our reviews section. Check. So our reviews section covers document reviews, and this might be where a learner has uploaded a document, a license, or feedback or imagery that requires a reviewer to view it, assess it, or complete it, and either mark it as complete, or if it's not quite the right information provided, pass it back to the learner to action accordingly. The other thing that is in the review section is on-the-job assessments, and these are assessments that sit mainly in the hands of the reviewer and assessor first. They'll open a form from this section and conduct an assessment, generally through observation and marking against criteria in the form, entering comments and tasks overall. And they can also upload files and videos, but we'll get into that detail shortly. But they're the two things that when we talk about the review section, we're referring to either a document review or an on-the-job assessment. Now, before we go into the detail of each, similar to the approvals, you have a filter, a search filter that you can use. Again, you can use the user's name or the username, external IDs, emails. You can also perhaps use connections if that's an easier way to search. The element type, so at the moment you can either search for just document reviews or on the job. And the status, so if it is in a pending learner or pending reviewer state. When you have those fields populated, always remember to hit search. Once you hit search, you'll then get the results across all three of these buttons. You don't have to redo the search each time you click into a different button or section here. We're just going to leave it blank for now. And we'll look at the states or the buttons here. We're going to start in reverse. So we're actually going to start at the My Completed Reviews section. And I will possibly repeat myself a fair bit in this next section. And that's purely just the steps. When we get to pending and assigned reviews, these steps are so important to follow, and it can impact the learner and the overall record keeping of the system and the reviews or assessments if it isn't necessarily followed correctly. So the My Completed Reviews section is just that. It's reviews and assessments that you have completed previously. They have a status of completed listed here with a date of when it was done. You can see whether or not it was a review or an on-the-job assessment and what element it is in relation to. Similar to our goal profile, when we complete something, we get a review button. This is what this is here, where you can access the review, see any timeline results, comments, and have no effect overall on the actual record itself. You can just see what happened. Okay, so we're back into my completed reviews. Oh, now we're moving to pending reviews. So our pending reviews, so most of the time, the item sitting here should say pending learner or pending reviewer. It'll say pending learner if it is still waiting for the learner to action something. If it says pending reviewer, most likely for a document review, that means the learner has uploaded the required documents. An on-the-job assessment will always say pending reviewer, because until it is completed, be that successfully or not, the learner has no access to that form. So if you are wanting to share the criteria of an assessment, you would need to do that in an alternative manner. They can't see this form until it is completed. In this area, you've only got the one action button, and this is the assign option. As a manager, you will likely only see your staff, and therefore it assigns to me. So it will assign directly to me. If I go in and give myself, let's give myself Betty's document review, I automatically assign it, and it will we'll see it sitting here in assigned reviews when we click in there in a moment. If you do hold another security role as a manager, you will have an assign button with a secondary pop-up where you will choose who to assign it to, and be that yourself or another person. Ideally, you will only ever move an item from this space to assigned reviews when it is in a pending reviewer status. So we'll move to the assigned reviews section. And you can see here is Betty Smith. It's the one I just assigned to myself. But the assigned reviews, this is where most of the action does happen. These are the reviews and assessments that you have been assigned, that you assigned yourself, as I did with Betty Smith, or perhaps a trainer admin or system admin has seen an action is required from you as a manager and assigned it to you. But again, ideally, anything in this area only has an assigned review status, a pending reviewer status, sorry, and no pending learner. And so pending reviewer, like I've said, it means it's something for you to action. So the reason I'm repetitive about keeping things in a pending reviewer status is that this is actually what the learner sees. So when they have an action to do, they will see that. If I switch into a learner for the time being, and we'll go to help you get started, we'll see here that Hyacinth has a pending learner status. And hopefully what happens is if you assign it to yourself, sorry, bear with me while we do this live switch. What will happen is, have I given Hyacinth? Yes. I'll assign it to myself. Now, Hyacinth hasn't done anything. See how it still says pending learner? But I'm assigning it to myself. It's now sitting here in the pending reviewer. I've gone in. Oh, there's nothing there. Oh, there's nothing I need to do. I'm going to exit out and I'm going to unassign it because there's nothing I need to do. If we look back here in pending reviews, we will see that Hyacinth's status still says pending reviewer. And hopefully, if I refresh my screen, you can see the status for Hyacinth has changed to pending reviewer. So for all intents and purposes, she may log in, see that it's pending reviewer, and therefore there's nothing she needs to do. So this is why we're really encouraging managers only to assign it to yourself when it is in a pending reviewer status, which means someone has done it. If for any reason you really want to see if someone has done something, then you can always access it from their goal profile. So let me get my example. Who have I got here? So see how it's got valid driver's license. If you're really desperate, it'll pretend it says pending learner, but you can always just click upload document, and you can see here, without affecting anything, without changing the status, if there is anything, and you can exit straight out and it will just leave it be. So that's how you can see without assigning it to yourself and unassigning it. You can just go upload document. Of course, if you are doing something on behalf of a learner, that's totally fine. You can assign it to yourself and then action it accordingly. I will share. So if you do find yourself assigning things and you've gone, oh, I shouldn't have done that, how do I fix this? You can assign it to yourself again, and you can go into it and you can go, I'm so sorry, this was assigned by accident. Please upload the required document when available. You can make a comment and hit save. What this will do is trigger a message to the learner that they have something to do for this element. And also there's a record to say, yep, this is what's happened. If we exit out, we have managed to change the status back to pending learner. You can unassign it, and it has kind of reverted back to that stage. It isn't the most ideal process. And if we go back into Hyacinth's profile, so that's gone back to pending learner. And if she goes to upload, she can see the comment there. In assigned reviews, we've got, let's go to David Smith. He has a first aid certificate for us to verify and validate. So we're going to launch that. We're going to have a look at what he has done. So what you'll see is one of two things. You might have multiple records in this timeline, or he might have uploaded the file and a comment at the same time. Either way, you can click on the file name. This will not be a driver's license, but he's uploaded a professional development procedure instead of his driver's license. So unfortunately for David, this isn't correct, but if it was, we could enter an expiry date here. We can enter a completed date if we need to. We can add comments or additional documentation. There's a few things to note. So this expiry date field is available to learners, so they can populate it. You do have the option to clear it. So if it is incorrect or not needed, that is a clear option. And here we have a completed of date. And most often what occurs is we do get certificates after an event has happened. And so we want to retrospectively go back and use that date as a completion record rather than the day you're actually actioning it. So you can enter those details in there. If the completion date and expiry date isn't applicable, you can leave both fields blank and just hit save and mark as complete. And it will just use the date, today's date. So if we were to do that right now, David's record would say he completed it on the 14th of June, and that's it. If we perhaps said his driver's license was correct or the document is right, but he completed it back in April of this year, and then we save and marked it as complete. We have today's date, that this is when we actioned it, and we marked it as complete for 14th of April. If we now go to David's profile, and I believe it's in, if you get started, nope, key learning. We can see that it's picked up the previous date that we entered for the completed of, so it can do it retrospectively. Because this element has a renewal cycle, it has automatically applied that. I didn't need to put in an expiry, it automatically picked that up. And that's how you complete a review. If you do need to check it again, once it's complete, you have got the review button here on their profile and you can see the records. Okay, we're going to launch into on-the-job assessments now. So, reviews. Okay, so we've got here the element type and we have our example that we're going to use today. So we're launching. On the screen for an on-the-job assessment, we have key details like what the assessment is about, what the minimum passing grade is to achieve, who's assessing and who is being assessed and who is the assessor. When all is said and done, or at any time, you have the option to upload commentary for an overall status, any files. These could be videos of the observations, photos, feedback documents, anything. You can add them here and save, and it will give a timeline of when those comments were made and they're accessible to the learner once this is finalized. Depending on how the form is set up, and again, setting up forms and the back end of on-the-job assessments and reviews will be covered in our trainer and system admin webinar sessions in the future. But for the case of this form has been created in 2 sections. And if we expand out this first section, we have our criteria. Now, it's not really clear to me. It's time to answer a call. Well, what does that mean? The person that's created this form has provided us a description. So if we click on our little question mark over to the right, we can see here it's clear to us. Did the consultant answer all the phone calls within 10 seconds? We can say, yes, they were competent. But you also have an option of not yet competent, recognition of prior learning, or if it's been enabled, not applicable. When the form is set up, this not applicable can be turned off so that you only can use one of these 3 results. You also have the option to provide any comments. This is a comment for Braun Auto about her assessment. You can save, and when this is finalized, they can be viewed. And it's also listed here in the timeline if you need to add more than one. So I'm going through now. You can see here as we're moving through, I've marked all of these as competent par 1. And what's happening here is a current grade down the bottom adjusts. So at the moment it's red. I took it back because the minimum grade to achieve this is 80%. So the system automatically picks up on what those the results are and grades it accordingly. Now, RPL is considered the same as competent because obviously it's recognition of prior learning. So depending on how you are marking items in this assessment, you would pick the appropriate result. It's working its way up to 100. Now, for us, for the finalize button to appear, all fields need to be completed. So just because the current or the minimum grade has been achieved, we don't get a finalize button, but she could be marked as not yet competent and still have a finalize and pass this because she has met the minimum grade. We're going to make Bron competent though, 100%. And if that's all good, you don't have anything or you've done all your uploading, you can finalize and that completes the assessment. It moves now into our completed reviews and we can see that we did it on this date. And if we launch the review, we can then see all those items. We can look at any assessment feedback or documents that were attached and look in any comments that were left. And the learner has this as well. But what I'm going to show is a learner that perhaps didn't successfully complete their assessment, but was still marked as finalized. Either way, they still see that. So they'll see where perhaps they were not successful. So here we've got this fire safety assessment for Meredith. She has a red cross. It wasn't successful on this date. She can click review and we can click review and see where it is she went a bit wrong. So evacuation, she was unable to locate the exits, which is quite unfortunate in a fire safety check. So that's how it happens for a person that is perhaps not so successful. And then we'll go back in as Michael. Take a look at Bron and we'll see that the etiquette, now I believe etiquette is in here. Yep. And this is her 100%, so she can see everything as well. Of course, at any time through an on-the-job assessment, and it might be something that happens over a period of time, it may need to be stopped and then restarted. So for example, this one was stopped at 17%. You can start it and then just exit straight out. It will hold on to that grading, and if perhaps you need to unassign it and give it to another assessor, you can do that and they'll pick it up from where you left off. So we were speaking, so that's the on-the-job assessments. Earlier on, I mentioned that depending on what action you choose during the approval process, or any document for that matter, some certain messages get sent out. So the 4 messages that a learner may receive as part of an approval or review process is a request has been approved, a request has been denied, there is a document action pending. So when we move something from a pending reviewer status back to a pending learner, if that's enabled, they'll receive that. And they also receive an event registered email if an approval is approved, successful. At this stage, the one thing that doesn't happen is an alert to the learner when they've been added to the wait list. When a learner has chosen an instance, if the button doesn't say add to wait list, it might just say request. So they may think, oh, there's room, there's spaces, I can go in and go for an approval. By the time they are actually approved by their manager, that event may be full. So right now, if you do add a learner to the wait list, you're more than welcome to send them an email. I do recommend, and I did recommend in our learner webinars, that they go into their Birch platform and have a look at the icons and see the current state of their instance. To be in an event that has a manager approval, they need to receive at least 1 to 2 emails. One will be an approval message that it was approved by their manager to attend. And the most important one is the email registration message. So that is where they have explicitly been told, you have been registered into the following event, this day and time. And there is for those that know this, there is a calendar invitation that you can add to your Outlook or phone calendar. This is what tells them they've been put into an event. Just because they've requested to attend and an approval has happened, if they do not receive this, they are not registered. So they may get a message that says you've been approved by your manager, but that manager may have added them to the wait list rather than actually into the event. Appreciate we've gone over time, but that does conclude our webinar for today. I appreciate and thank you guys for your time and for following along for the reviews and on-the-job assessments. It's certainly a bigger one that could have possibly had paid with a little bit more time, but hopefully this has covered the basics for you. Next week, we have the most requested, probably very popular and nerve-wracking one for me, reporting webinar, which will look at all the reports in details, templates, sharing reports, and how that will work. So that's next week at 11 o'clock again. To see you all next week, and